listening to the home of cool, irreverent, and entertaining talk, right here on LA Talk Radio. You're listening to The Art of Love with your host, Lucia, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to The Art of Love. My name is Lucia. I'm your host and a dating and relationship expert. And I'm here to entertain, educate, and enlighten you about love, dating, and relationships. Take your live calls, answer your emails, and speak to authors of books, which I find fascinating. And the book we will be discussing today is the book that I find the most fascinating on this topic. I think it's the best self-help book ever written on love, dating, and relationships. And when I say I'm excited to speak to the author of this book, it's an understatement. In fact, I feel like I've been preparing my whole life for this interview because I discovered this book in my early 20s. And as I already told the author, I actually had to steal the book from the library because Amazon.com was not around at that time. And it was not available at the bookstore, so I had no choice but to steal it. But I have since made amends and donated many books to the library since. So I'm sure you're wondering which book I'm talking about. The name of the book is Love Tactics, How to Win the One You Want. So before He's Just Not That Into You and Before the Rules, there was Love Tactics, and I believe it's the Bible for anyone interested in love, dating, and relationships. So, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction, Lucia. That was so nice.
Well, I had to give the book the proper introduction. It's affected my life so much. You know, I've highlighted the book, and I mean, it really is my Bible. I even made a recording of everything I highlighted on a cassette back in the day, and I would play the cassette over and over, trying to program my mind to remember everything, because I knew these principles were so important, but it's not easy to implement them at first when you first read about them.
Bless your heart. That's exactly how I tell people when I teach anything. I say, you know, the way you do it is you go through the book, you underline and outline and highlight everything that's new to you that you just intuitively know is true. Then I tell them, go back and take that and write everything you've underlined and highlighted in your own little personal notebook. You're skimming the cream from the top, and then you take that and put it in a little notebook, and then you memorize it, and it becomes part of you. But it's a process, and as you do it, it becomes more automatic. So you do that by instinct, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was determined to get this right. So just to give a little bio on Tom McKnight is a humans relations expert and lecturer who writes and speaks on the subject of romantic love. He's a graduate of Brigham Young University. He was a social worker up until 6 years ago and was a columnist for the National Singles Registry, and he's now married with 5 children. So how did you and your co-author come to write this best-selling book?
Well, initially, I was older when I got married, Lucia. Mm-hmm. So for all those out there who are still wondering if love is out there, you know, it is, and you just can't give up hope. But because I was older, I noticed by the time I was 28 that I had a lot of experience in dating, mm-hmm. and I had learned a lot of things, and my skills had, at least to me, had seemed to improve. I was getting better results. I hadn't found the one that I wanted yet, but I still knew that I had learned something. And so I thought, let's crystallize those principles that I've learned, and we put them down into a book. Later, I was introduced to Bob Phillips, who's the co-author of Love Tactics, but the initial writing of it was the principles that I had learned really by experience and by learning. I was also a social worker that had helped quite a bit in learning that human beings have certain ways that they react in common with one another. There's certain behaviors in all of us that are hardwired in, and that helped me to put things in perspective in my own personal life in the singles world. And so that was kind of the genesis of Love Tactics.
And how many languages has this book been reinterpreted into?
Well, we just received the 14th language. It just was translated into Korean. Whether south or north, it's all the same, I guess. Right. Except for the government. But it's been in all the Asian languages, the Romance languages. It's Indonesian. It's all over the globe, and we've been very gratified with the reception it's received, and it's still receiving.
Yeah, well, yeah. Here we are still talking about it, and it should be on everybody's bookshelf. So let's dig into the book. Now, you talk about the House of Love. So what is that?
Well, we talk about, that you need understanding love. I remember it seems like somebody I was working with when early in my career. I worked with a lot of women as a social worker. A male social worker is not as common as women, so I got to listen to a lot of them talk. And they would opine about their love lives and about their young married lives and so forth. And one of them just one day said, she was making all of these observations, and then she just stopped and she said, I wonder, why do people love each other? What is it that makes them love each other? And I thought, I've been crystallizing those principles in my mind about that time, and I wanted to raise my hand and say, I know. Well, there's certain common factors, and the foundation of love, whether a person knows it or not, we usually think of, if you think of love as like an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is the romance, the passion, the excitement that we all think about, but there is so much more involved. The foundation is friendship. At its heart, it's what it is being able to have someone that you trust, who trusts you, that you feel safe with, who isn't going to be hurting you, who you can turn to for comfort, and those things are at the very core of any loving relationship. If you don't have that, your iceberg is your little block of ice is going to melt pretty quick, and that happens to a lot of people. They have a little passion, but they don't have the friendship to sustain it. So the foundation of the house you were referring to is friendship, and then the structure that is the walls, you might say, is respect, and the crowning effect of a loving relationship is passion. When you appreciate what it is that you have. When we think of passion, usually, people usually equate it with sexual things, but passion is really much more than that. It's a mental thing, it's an emotional thing, it's a psychological thing. It's a sense of wanting and appreciating what you have so much that there's just an excitement about it. And when you take somebody for granted, you don't have passion for them. Or if they take you for granted, they don't have passion for you. And in a marriage, when two people start to take each other for granted, the passion kind of wears. And in a lot of marriages, the passion is kind of it's blunted. It's blunted over the years. It may not be completely gone, but it can still be there as long as there's still that element of not being able to take each other for granted. And that's one of the principles of love tactics we teach. We can talk about that later, but it's primarily that you don't ever put yourself in a position or allow the other person to feel that they can walk over you or take you for granted.
That's right.
It's related to respect, but if they do feel that way, then they can't have that passion for you, and they won't feel complete in the overall experience of love in a love relationship with you.
Yes, they won't have the complete love house. So let's dig into some of the behavior principles before we talk about the actual tactics. And it's great because you've got all these tactics numbered, and it's such an easy book to read. There's over 45 tactics. So behavior principle number 1, people subconsciously grow dependent upon those who satisfy their emotional needs. So what do you mean by that?
Okay, well, people don't consciously know a lot of times why they fall in love with somebody, but I can't tell you, Lucia, how many times this has happened to me. I've had friends who, through the years, have said, "Oh, I could never go for that person, or I could never love that person." One guy that comes to mind, he was dating a girl pretty regularly, and so I said, "Well, how's it going? Is this going to go somewhere?" He said, "No, not really." He didn't really believe that he was going to be able to be happy with her.
Uh-huh.
And then one day they up and get married, and that was over. Well, let's see, it was approximately 30 years ago. Through the miracle of Facebook, I just recently came in contact with them again. They're happily married, starting their grandkids now.
Mm-hmm.
And so what had happened was my friends, particularly the guy, didn't realize that he had a subconscious bonding that was occurring towards this girl. Mm-hmm. And so on the conscious level, he didn't realize that he was falling in love with her, but he was becoming more and more bonded. And in their particular case, I don't know what the particular crisis event was, but usually what happens is you create the bonding,
mm-hmm.
and then there's this threat to losing the person,
right.
and it pulls the heartstrings, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm hooked. I didn't know I was hooked before, but I'm hooked. And it's a scary and an exciting thing both at the same time. It's scary because you realize I have really finally got my foot stuck in the door, and I can't get out. But on the other hand, it's like, this is what I've actually been looking for all this time. So on the unconscious level, we build bonds of, again, friendship, and there has to be this respect involved. Respect is just basically knowing that you can't cross the other person. That
they're not a doormat.
If you feel, go ahead.
That the other person isn't a doormat.
Right. If you're in a relationship with somebody, and you just love them to death, they're just the sweetest, most wonderful, good person, but you also know that you could do almost anything. You could be unfaithful to them, and they still will allow that and just still be there for you. It destroys the satisfaction that you can have with the whole relationship. You need to have that sense of, if I ever cross this person, I would lose them. Mm-hmm. And when you have that feeling, then you're able to have the complete, more complete experience of feeling in love towards that person.
Okay, so
go ahead. Let me say, there's a difference between being in love when you're so excited and head over heels with somebody, and loving that person in a way that you're not conscious of that excitement. Like if most people. Well, maybe not, but many people will grow up in a family situation where they don't realize how much they love their brothers and their sisters, their parents, the ones that they're being raised with, until one day something happens to somebody,
right.
And then they grieve so terribly.
Right.
And what we teach in Love Tactics is that you develop on positive principles relationships with the people around you, the women you date, the men you date, and as you do so, that same kind of bonding occurs in families. And then you allow the situation to eventually present itself where, they might be threatening to say leave you, and they might be expecting that you're going to break down and fall all apart.
Uh-huh.
But if you're strong and show that, no, you're going to be fine and
right.
you can live without them, then all of a sudden it turns the tables.
Yes.
Emotionally, one minute they thought they could leave you, and now they realize they can't leave you because they have a new perception of you as a strong person that they respect, who's going to be fine without them.
Right. Okay, good. Let's move on because we got a lot of questions here
all right,
to answer. And one more principle you said people want what they can't have, and you have what I call the love equation, which I always use, and it's hope plus doubt equals passion. So why do you have to have
right.
Why do you have to have that hope and doubt?
Well, you got to have assuming we're trying to put this recipe together in the part of, let's say, a guy that you've got your eye on. Mm-hmm. He's got to have just enough hope that he's not going to Okay, he can't be so shut down that he feels like anytime he approaches you, he doesn't have a chance, because then he just gives up,
right,
and he moves on. But if he knows he can have you too, and this is both men and women make this mistake sometimes. They like somebody, and so they make it immediately obvious to the other person that I'm yours for the asking. Let's say two people have started dating, and one of them is crazy, head over heels with the other. And so, let's say it's a girl in this case. So she stops dating any other guys. When she stops dating any other guys, especially if she lets the guy she's dating know that, what does that tell the guy? It tells him, I've got her. And, well, now what do I do with her? Well, let's see. I don't want to commit myself at this point, because I've got all of the everything, I have everything going my way, but to commit myself too soon is crazy. So he'll basically take her as a trophy, polish her up a little bit, put her up on his shelf, and he'll date her, but he'll start looking for another conquest or another challenge. And that isn't what she wanted at all. So basically, she's got to keep the
little bit of doubt,
the challenge going there.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to some of the tactics. I'm going to start with number 10, which you say, take your time and go slowly. And you said it's common to feel two conflicting desires at the same time. So why is that?
Let's see. I refresh my memory a little bit about the two conflicting desires.
You said on the one hand, we desire to be free and uncommitted.
Oh, right.
While on the other hand, we yearn to belong to someone. So how can we work with those two?
Okay. Well, okay. Okay, the person you're trying to win is going to, by nature, the minute they sense that they're being cornered, they're going to become like a wild animal, and they're going to be looking to
get away.
Get away, yeah. Not too long ago, we had a mouse get in our house, and I saw it go in one of the rooms, and so I immediately blocked off that room so that it wouldn't get into the rest of the house, so we could trap it somehow. And then we got it into the bathroom, and then so we're getting in progressively smaller space. He was hiding under something we had in there, but we didn't want to lift that up until we had the room all blocked out, because the second we did, he was going to dart. And so we blocked off all the exits, and then lifted up the box that he was behind, and bingo, boy, you should have seen him. He was crazy with desperation trying to get out of that room. Well, we human beings are the same way when we feel ourselves getting cornered into a relationship. So you don't want to come on too strong with a person. You're winning the game when each time that you go on a date with this person and have a positive interaction with them. It's like another thread around the two of you to bind the two of you together. But if you scare the person off too soon and make them think that you've set your cap for them and that you're planning, you have no other plans in your mind except to marry them, even though they might have been very happy to have married you at some point, the bonds aren't strong enough yet. So you've got to play for a little more time. You've got to keep the relationship a little casual, much longer than is the conventional wisdom on that. People are hopping into way intimate relationships way too soon and thinking that that's going to hook the other person, and it's what it does actually is it sabotages it. I can't tell you how many letters and consultations I've had on that, but you want to play for time. Allow time to go by where before you commit yourself to the other person. Usually, you've heard before, the person who commits least is in the most control, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to stay in control, especially if you want to make this relationship last. And so you've got to play for time.
Right. Go as slow as possible. Okay. So then you say in number 13. And I always quote you on this too, show you care but don't say it. And you say people have a subconscious need to stay free and unemotionally committed. They will go to great lengths to avoid circumstances which limit that freedom.
Right. So if you're telling the other person you are in love with them or letting them know that, those kind of things, then they feel trapped, and they're going to be desperately looking for a way to get out, and they'll find one if there's any way possible, and there usually is. So you want to make sure that by showing that you care, it gives them hope that, I may be able to hook you, for example. Now, let's say you really wanted me, but if you show it too quickly, then I'm going to escape. So you show you care, so I have hope that you might be available, but you don't commit yourself on it, and so that leaves me in just a little bit of a doubt. And the mystique is so important in sustaining the passion, the excitement, while we're stretching out the time and allowing this relationship to season and to cure in a more lasting way.
Right. We're laying a foundation that's going to hold it up the relationship longer than just something quick.
And initially, it is the excitement, the infatuation, the passion that keeps a couple dating one another, and you don't want to kill that too quickly. And anytime you let the person know too well that they've got you, you're just throwing water on their passion, their fires of passion, and it's exactly opposite of what you want to do. You want their passion to stay burning for a long, long time.
Yes, so that's why. Is that why you say then why that love is like an addiction?
Well, do you remember the context I used that in?
But
can you give me a little more to work on that?
Basically, it's like when you take away the source of someone's addiction, they go crazy.
yeah, right. In other words, okay. This is a terrible analogy. I apologize for it, but if a guy's a drug pusher is trying to get somebody hooked, he doesn't come in and tell you all of the downside of what he's trying to do. He'll come in and he'll say, hey, here's no cost. Just try a little bit of this. This won't. It's a freebie. It's on me, and it'll make you feel good, and you get nothing but the good effects of it. And then when you're hooked, and you don't realize that you really need this, then they're in a position to start extracting a price from you for that. Well, the price of love is a commitment. We commit our whole lives. We get married. We say, I'll be with you. I'll be exclusive to you my whole life long. And to expect somebody to come in for that without first basically feeling that they are in love with you. Love is like an addiction in that if you don't allow them to become good and hooked on you before you start showing indications of having expectations of a commitment back from them, you'll lose them. They'll be more prone to stay with you if they're able to.
If they're hooked, then they'll do anything.
Right, but again, this is a positive hook versus something we're talking about very negative out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like a hook on a fish.
Right.
Okay, so number 26, you say act indifferent to their opinion of you, and why is that? Well,
it's just that you want to show independence. Part of the commanding respect. Okay, the three pillars of love are developing their friendship, commanding their respect, and inciting their passion, their excitement for you because they're uncertain about you. You've got to have them feel about you that if they are not, if they're not behaving properly, they could lose you. And
but also you want to be like aloof, like you don't really care what their feelings are towards you.
Yeah, but well, I mean, give you an example. So there was a girl that I was seeing. I was on the verge of dating her. I didn't date her, but we were flirting up a storm. And and I liked her independence of mind. That was really what intrigued me. We had a lot of interesting discussions and debates about different things. She didn't seem like she cared what I thought, and that was so enticing to me. and it is to most of us. But she started getting a little bit. She liked me. That's clear. That's what was happening. And so one night we were talking about something, and she threw out an opinion on some subject that was contrary to my opinion on it, and it became obvious that that was the case. And she just stopped and put her hand over her mouth. She said, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that." And the second she did that, I knew she cared what my opinion of her was. And the minute that happened, she lost some of her mystique. She was a challenge before, and I was on the verge of beginning to date her. And at that point, it was like, oh, wait a minute, I already got her. The conquest is over. Men especially are driven by the challenge of a conquest to win somebody's heart. And once they know they've got that heart in their palm of their hand, then they're less prone to work for it anymore. That's why guys will so often take a girl for granted the minute she finally becomes their girlfriend, and they've got to keep in mind that, you know what, I got to make this guy work hard for me. And as much as it's, you know, in our nature, we want to just surrender ourselves totally to this person because we think so highly of them. The second we do that, they will not think so highly of us anymore. We've got to play the game. It's sorry to say that because so many people say, why do we have to play the game? Why can't we just tell them how we feel? And I can't tell you how many times I've listened to people give this advice on movies and television shows and things, and they say, just go tell them how you feel. And I'm thinking, you know, even if the person is nice enough to act like, oh, that means so much to me, in their heart they're going, oh, dag, now, okay, well, I'll just put they're going to start putting in a little distance at that point. So you've got to be aloof enough that they feel they have to work for you to win you liking them in that way.
And so then you do this until they fall in love with you, and then you can reveal your feelings. Is that right? Yeah,
but you know what, Lucia, this is the thing. I mean, it's a degreed type of thing. It's not an all or nothing thing. The more you get in a relationship with somebody, you know, then you can show more vulnerability, so to speak. But you know, now I wrote Love Tactics when I was 28. And I'm 56 now, so it's half a lifetime I've had to observe this. And been married 17 of those years now. So I can tell you, and this isn't just my marriage, but even in a marriage, you need to retain some degree of independence. Because if you ever roll over and just let the other person totally run and dictate your life, they won't have the respect for you that's necessary to keep romance and love alive, even in the marriage. But yes, back to what you were saying, you can become less aloof as you get closer to engagement, and then when you're engaged and when you're married. But there should always be, to some degree, of retaining your own independent values and opinions. That you don't care what the other person thinks. This is where you're, you know, I mean, you are entitled to your opinions on the universe. You are a unique person, and you should never surrender that.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on to tactic number 27. Don't fish for feedback. Why not?
Oh, well, it's a dead giveaway that you care, and so. You know, when you start fishing for compliments or hints that you know, then the other person knows, they care what I think, and I've never met anybody who couldn't tell when that was happening. Just from your experience, Lucia, I mean, you've dated quite a bit. Yes. I mean, you've had, you know, has the shoe been on the other foot where you've ever experienced that with a guy who got hooked and he was trying to maybe get you to commit yourself in some way to him, and that you experienced what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And I think most of the listening audience has had that happen at one time or not. And so the basic is just, you know, you have to act like you don't really care what they think. Now, I never say be cruel or not that I haven't been cruel in my life. I apologize to tell you that I have, but I don't believe in that. I think that we should try to be considerate and be. I believe in being a nice guy. But you know the expression,
yes.
Nice guys finish last.
Right.
Or well, here's the better one. Nice guys are boring.
Yes.
But the jerks are all exciting.
Right.
And so what? And this I know you can identify with this more with a guy being the jerk, and a guy being the nice guy who is boring. But it works the other way too. Women can be the same way.
Sure.
The principle is not being a jerk; it's being independent. The jerks really just don't care what you think.
Right.
And that's
why they're so attractive.
That's the attractive element
right.
there. So if you can be a nice guy
and not
but have the devil may care, or the Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn what you think.
Right.
That's sort of an approach. Then that's so much more attractive. So the love tactics principle is be a nice person, but be aloof and independent enough that the other person has to look up to and respect you. And when they do, they are much more prone to fall in love with you. And given enough time in association with you under those circumstances, they will.
Good. Okay, let's move on to anger, because at some point someone's going to do something that's going to piss you off. And you said express anger verbally when the right moment arrives. And you said the only thing you can ever really show anger over is any basic disrespect or regard for your feelings. So that's the only thing you can ever really get angry about?
Well, I don't know. I was young when I wrote that. Don't be throwing tantrums over petty stuff, and most stuff is petty. But you do want to make it clear that you're not going to tolerate disrespect from the person. And if they are out and out, demeaning you in some way, or generally the best way to handle something like that is just to cut the person off. And I guess you're going to come to the drop them cold and stuff like that.
Yes, trust me.
But there comes a time when it's legitimate to just look at the person with righteous indignation and say, "Hey, you know what? You're out of line. Don't cross that line. I'm nice, but I'm not a doormat, and you don't do that. And you make it clear in your tone of voice that, I'm not going to tolerate that." Now, most people who are in a relationship where they really like the other person will never, ever speak in that tone to a person, even if they're being abused. And it's because they're afraid of the other person. They're intimidated by the other person. But if you allow that intimidation to not stand up when you're being mistreated, the abuse and the amount that the person despises you will just grow. There comes a point where you have to take a stand and say, "You know what? I like you a lot, but I don't like you so much that I have to take you don't have to speak all these words.
Right.
You just make it evident in your tone of voice. But I like you a lot, but I don't like you so much that you're going to be able to just walk all over me. So if you think that's the case, have a nice day and don't let the door hit you on your way out." Sort of thing. And the person may be kind of aggravated at you, but they will respect you. And in hindsight, with a little time to think it over, they're going to like you a lot more because of it.
Right.
In fact, it just popped in my mind. Remember the movie My Fair Lady? Is that before your time? Or...
No, I don't really remember it. Sorry.
Well, from an old story called Pygmalion, but there was a girl that Professor Higgins took off the street, and he made her into a lady, and she was totally in love with the professor, and enthralled with him all along. But to him, she was always just a flower girl that sold flowers on the street, but he turned her into this marvelous lady that everybody else was in love with, but she was in love with him. But he still treated her like a flower girl. And anyway, one day she just had enough, and she told him off. And Professor Higgins he had a smile on his face as she's telling him off, and he says, "Liza, before you were just a whimpering little flower girl. He says, but now, he says, you're a tower of strength. I like you this way. and then she says, goodbye, Professor. She walks out on him, So a lot of times people, they wait until they're actually ready to walk out of the door before they'll finally tell the person off. And that's when the other person goes crazy about it. You've heard, Lucia, I know you've heard many times in relationships how a guy mistreats a gal. Well, it works both ways, but let's just say the guy mistreats the girl for years until she walks out on him, and then he's whimpering on the floor and begging her to come back, and he's helpless without her, and she should have just been strong about treating him that way before she ever left. Because a lot of times she won't come back after that. But if she'd just been strong all along, it would have helped him straighten him up, and they could have had a better relationship, and she wouldn't have had to leave, and the relationship fail.
Right, which takes us to the shaking their confidence chapter. So you say, while people disrespect that which they have in the palm of their hand and are attracted to that which they can't get, they become absolutely frantic with desire over that which they already possess, but are in danger of losing.
Yeah, I tell you what, even though we're talking about finding a relationship, finding the one you want, and getting married, the best evidence you can find of that is in marriages where husbands for years have, take their, and I have many friends that have been in this situation. They totally took their spouse for granted until one day she walked out on them, and then they took her for granted because they thought they had her in the palm of their hand, and then when they lose her, now they'll do anything to win her back. There was not a married couple, but there was another couple many years ago, 20 years ago, that I was friends with both of them, and they went along, and she wanted to get married. He was determined he was not going to get married, and it's like, well, why don't you just break up with her? Well, he's got nothing better going, so he's just going to,
waste her time.
Continue. Just continue on this relationship. But he had no intentions of marrying her, and so finally she broke. I told her, let's see, probably, seemed 6 months to a year before she finally broke up with him. I said, if you want him, you just
break up
to
with
break
him.
up. Break up with him. And she wouldn't do it. She just didn't have the strength at that time. So finally, she didn't get the strength. She just got, what's the word? Sick of him.
Yeah.
So she was. She was really mad. Now she was really leaving him. She wasn't breaking up with him for a tactic. She was breaking up with him because she was damn mad about it. Mm-hmm. And so as she left him, and I heard about it. And the first week afterwards, I saw him and I said, "So how you feeling?" He says, "Well, I miss her, but, I'm kind of relieved. I don't have the pressure of her wanting to marry me, and her wanting me to get married anymore." And say, "Oh, okay, all right." 2 weeks later, I heard from a friend that he was now really depressed about it. Uh-huh. And by the third week, he was climbing the walls. Now he was calling the girl, begging her to come back any terms. He'd marry her. He would do anything she asked. And so she made him wait, and it's a good thing she did, because I think if she'd come back too soon, he would have relented and thought he had her, and he wouldn't have followed through. But she made him wait probably a good 6 months before. He had to beg and crawl and grovel for 6 months, and so finally, when she came back, they got married. But that's that which we have in the palm of our hand we take for granted. But when it's removed, then all of a sudden the passion comes into play, and that's what happened in their case. And they have one child, beautiful child. Well, probably grown now. I haven't seen him for a few years, but it was a great marriage at the time that I last saw them.
Yeah, because you mentioned the source of an addiction isn't, you don't realize you're addicted to something or someone until it's removed. Yeah, right. It's kind of like when you get 3 square meals a day, you never realize how dependent you are on food. Well, I do. That's one of my weaknesses. But you as soon as you start cutting off what you're used to having, then all of a sudden you become frantic for it. And so imagine putting yourself in a relationship where you are a true friend to somebody, and they you show that you are a blessing in their life in every way, and then
they take you for granted, but then one day you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that's when they're going to really, really realize how much they needed and wanted you all along. And so then you have to lose something sometimes to appreciate what you had.
Yeah.
Let's see. What's that song?
Don't know what you got till it's gone.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Thank you.
Now, you say also to create competition, but don't you have to be careful how you do it? Because some people, if they see competition, they're like, that's it, I'm out of here.
Right. Okay, back to the hope plus doubt equals passion. So, you can, well, I mean, if you're in a committed relationship, then you can't really have competition. But if the person is not committed to you, you should never be acting so committed to them that you're not dating other people. You should always be clear that, hey, I have lots of friends. You're one of the friends. You're a very special friend. You're a good friend. But I'm not available Friday night. No, I got plans, and just a lot of times the imagination alone is more potent than actually knowing what the competition you might be providing would be to the other person. So my mother, when she was younger, she had my mom was married 3 times, but my father was her third marriage. Finally, one stuck. But when she was younger, before she got married, there was a guy who she and he were kind of an item, and then they kind of went their own ways for a while. And she came back in contact with him. This is in a small town in Texas, and they were having a dance in the town, and so she just started cuddling up to every guy at the dance that was there. It drove this other guy crazy, and that's when they decided they were going to get married. He took her and said, hey, enough of this. I'm going to get married. Whereas before there was no inclination to do anything like that. Of course, that was still kind of a quickie. I'm not advising that. I still say take your time. And for that reason, their marriage didn't last. But the idea was that the competition created that urgency in him to make a commitment.
Right. Okay, what about, now you said to avoid being critical. So does that mean you can never criticize or give advice?
Well, okay. I'm trying to raise my kids like this, too. There's, this is back to let's go back to the foundation, because the foundation is really the most important aspect of
that's why it's the foundation.
Yes, that's right. And so basically we have 5 emotional needs as human beings, and when the person who meets those emotional needs for us is the best of our friends. And so if you want to become the best friend to another person, you want to meet those needs, and here they are. Count them off on your hand, 5 of them. Attention, understanding, acceptance, appreciation, and affection. Attention is basically, you can't ignore somebody and expect the relationship to develop. You do have to give some sort of attention. And I'll tell you that attention is probably the greatest gift we have. You don't realize it, but especially with raising kids. The most powerful thing I can give my kids is not a great Christmas this Christmas or anything. It's, Daddy, look at this, Dad, look at this. Oh, no, look at this. Watch me do this, watch me do that. Just watching the person, just being there. Just being there for a person, talking to them, listening to them. Well, we'll come to that in just a second. Okay, but basically attending to that person, addressing them, speaking their name, those kind of things are giving them attention. Understanding comes from listening to what a person has to say and showing in an empathetic way. We have on our website, lovetactics.com, and also in the book, we talk about the way to listen that's most effective in the world, and that's reflective listening. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, we don't really have time to go into that. So if you could move on to the to the next. We only have like 5 minutes, so I'm trying to.
All right. Okay. Acceptance means you don't reject a person by criticizing them. There are several ways you can criticize a person without even realizing it. One of which is use of the word why. When you ask a person, why, Why did you do that? You don't realize that, but you're setting in motion destructive forces in your relationship because you're in essence putting them onto the hot seat and demanding that they justify whatever it is they've been doing in their life. And it's uncomfortable. If a person experiences that enough, they're not going to like it. They're going to avoid it, and they'll do whatever they have to do, break up with you, avoid you, or whatever to avoid that. They may not even know that that's what's happening. So when we criticize or give advice to a person, even if we say this is constructive criticism, or I don't mean to criticize you, but the second you say that, the person's stomach is just going to knot up, and they're going to be not feeling good. The idea is you want the person to feel good. Right? Again, you want to have them have feelings that they're going to miss when you're not around, not feeling they're going to go, boy, I feel so much better now that person's not around, and asking me to justify myself all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then the other, let's see, tension, understanding, acceptance, appreciation. Most people don't know how to give a compliment or to recognize the good things that your positives. I mean, Lucia, you're a very good listener here. You're very patient. You're very kind. You're complimentary. But how many people will go out of their way to point those things out to you? Many people may see them, but they don't maybe say those things to you very often. And if they do say them, they make points with you. You like them more. And those are things that build. And the last thing is affection. People, once you have broken the ice with somebody, you need to be able to put your hand on their shoulder and touch them a little bit. I remember there was not in any sexual way, obviously. I had a supervisor. He was a man, but when I was working social work one day, second year into my social work program, he came up to my desk and asked how things were, and he just put his hand on my shoulder, and it was just such an affirming thing. I felt like my supervisor was my friend. He wasn't an enemy or a threat to me in any way.
Okay, so then acceptance, that's where you don't criticize or...
Right. Avoid criticizing. Every time you criticize somebody, you just took a step back in your relationship. So you can do it if you've got enough steps forward. But most of the time, people don't. People are just taking constant steps backwards, and then they wonder what happened when their person, the one they wanted, is gone out of their life, avoiding them.
Now, what if the person asks for your advice on something?
What they really want is to be understood and accepted. So you don't ever give advice, even when they ask you.
Wow.
It's a trap. Who among us has not fallen into it? We might think, we might say, I need your advice, but really it's a tricky way. I may not even be fully aware of it myself, but what I'm really asking for is I need some moral support. I need some, and I'll tell you, this is the best thing I ever happened with me. Was one time I had a dilemma I could not resolve before I got married, and my father saw the dilemma on my face, and he said, "You look troubled," and I didn't want to tell him what it was, and I finally broke down. I said, well, I want to do this, but I can't do this, and I want to do this, and they're two contrary things. There was no good answer. My father couldn't say, I advise you to do this, I advise you to do that. And so what he said was, just out of his nature, he said, so you are really torn, I see. And I said, yeah, I am. I'm torn into pieces. But you know what? That's what I needed. I needed somebody who would understand how I felt, not who was going to try and tell me what to do. If he'd have tried to tell me to do either of those alternatives, that would have felt awful, because neither solution was something I could feel good about. And because of his moral support and just his empathetic understanding without judging me or criticizing me, I then was able to go back and make a selection on my dilemma and decide what to do on my own. But and when we are like that with the person you're trying to win in a love relationship, when they feel that kind of support from you, they are drawn to you in a great portion. They become very bonded to you.
Wow.
And they may not realize it yet, but it's going to be hard for them to ever leave you.
Right. Until you try to leave them, then they freak out.
Right.
Well, we've come to the end of the interview, unfortunately. I could have you on for 5 hours straight.
Well, bless your heart, this has gone so fast.
I know. Well, that's what happens when you're having fun. But, Tom has written another book, More Love Tactics, because he realized there were more love tactics. So hopefully he'll come back in the new year and we'll discuss that.
Love to do it.
Yeah, because that's also about getting back the one that you've lost if you didn't treat them correctly. So again, the book is Love Tactics: How to Win the One You Want. The website.
We have lots of free information, Lucia, on lovetactics.com.
Right.
And we do paid consultations off the site, but there's more than enough stuff to keep you occupied for years just reading the articles we have there.
That's right. Okay. Well, Tom,
lovetactics.com.
Thank you so much for being on the show. It's really been an honor for me to finally talk to you after all these years.
Thank you. It's been an honor to talk to you.
Okay. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, that went by too fast. I was hurrying him up because I have like so many questions and I wanted to get through all of them. So I hope that was really helpful for you. For me, this is, like I said, the best book possibly written on the topic. It's like you have to study it and carry it with you and think about it and just contemplate and meditate and all those other things that end in ate about it before you can really understand it. It definitely deserves more than one reading. God knows how many times I've read it. All right, so it's time for me to go. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, my website is theartoflove.net. My book is at lessonsoflove.net, and that is Lucia's Lessons of Love. And finally, remember that love inspires, empowers, uplifts, and enlightens.
You're listening to The Art of Love with your host, Lucia, right here on LA Talk Radio.